Greetings, sister and brethren. It's awesome to be here. Thanks to the organisers for their inspirations and their energies in bringing us all together. I want to bring a nuanced perspective, mainly because when they said, "Is it for and against?" I thought I couldn't be either. The reason being, as Rastafari, I have to be Pan-African. I can't but not be Pan-African, right? And as Prof. Hakim was saying, for me, Pan-Africanism is a response from that moment where Europeans used a word from the Romance language, negra, right, to categorise peoples in a whole continent as something less than human and dehuman, right? That required a response, and Pan-Africanism has always been that response, something else, right? Now, there's a tricky little switch between from sharing a community of fate from at least 500 years in a wicked world system, a community of fate, to making that into a community of association. And a community of fate and a community of association are not quite the same thing. And Pan-Africanism is the thing which tries to bridge that, to make peoples who necessarily, even if they don't want to, share a community of fate because they all have African heritage, and that African heritage has, in this world system, been demonised, to go from that to something proactive and say we're going to be something different. That's a community of association. So for me, Pan-Africanism can't die because it is the response we have to make if we're going to live. Yet the question is, how does it work? Is it working now? What would it require to make it work? And I just want to say a couple of things to do with our situation in the UK. Because it seems to me, actually, I want to be positive, like Bro Joe, right? Because in actual fact, today, the UK is more Pan-African than it's been since the 1930s and 1940s. The populations of peoples of African heritage that we have in the UK is more diverse than it's ever since Grandad's time, right? Grandad's time, there was people from the continent, people from the Caribbean, all sharing the mix and producing a Pan-Africanism around Ethiopia, but then expanding that out, right? Today now, for every one person from, the traditional African diaspora, mainly Caribbean and UK, there's two people from the continent. So we're more empirically Pan-African than we've ever been since the 1930s and 1940s, the heyday of Pan-Africanism in the UK, as Prof. Hakim's work has shown. So that's the first thing I want to say. The question is, do we train our youth to deal with that reality? That's the question, right? Let me tell you, I teach at university, and many of my black students, and many of them, the majority of them are people from a continental background, right? Or their parents or their grandparents, right? You know what they say to me, because I was talking to them the other day, I say, why don't you kind of stick around on the campus at university, and why don't you kind of associate with lots of all these different people? And they say, well, a lot of them are from London, and we just don't understand people who ain't from London. Okay. And they say, and we've got all our mates back at home. And so, but if you want to change the world, you have to associate, right? You can't be a postcode. You see what I'm saying? If you can't even deal with another postcode, how can you deal with your own African peoples? How can you deal with the world? Because from then we have to deal with the world, right? So the first thing I want to say is, are we training our youth to understand the reality that they're living in now, which in actual fact is a positive reality? That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, we can't really check the elites at the moment, especially on the African continent. Most of them, right, they're for their own thing. They're not for the peoples. There are some who are, but the majority aren't. But look on another level, look on a micro level. If my sister Stella Headley, who was going to be here today, and she couldn't quite make it, but what she would talk about is her company called Shashamani Youth Creations, right? What she does, like many Rastafari, it's not just Rastafari, many people do this. They collect some capital in the UK or the US. Then they go to the continent, right? And they use that capital to invest in the youth, right? Build up their skills so they can trade and sell stuff. Go back, do it again, go back, do it again. When you look in your history books at the slave trade, it's a triangle, right? You seen that one? the triangle, you get stuck in the corners in a triangle, right? Is one way. We need to turn this into a circle, right? A righteous circle where things just circulate with the gravity on the continent. The gravity is on the continent, right? People are doing that. That to me is Pan-Africanism, right? But they're not doing it at the elite level. You won't see it there, but you'll see it on another level which no one talks about. You see what I'm saying? And mainly it's the women who are doing it. It's the women. The men talk and the women do. And then when you check the continent and you check the youth have a different energy now to the elites. If you look in South Africa, the youth are holding their own elites to account. That whole stuff about university, it ain't about universities, it's about the settlement of apartheid. Right? And there are many people around the continent who are doing that. So there's an energy there which we have to capture with our youth as well. The third and final thing I want to say is Pan-Africanism has to pay. The youth will not be interested unless it pays. People don't really want to read history books. But you know what I'm saying? If you lecture young people, they don't give a damn. They just what you talk. How are you going to help me? What's my thing? Now, there's two ways in which Pan-Africanism can be made to pay. One is a psychic and spiritual armament, right? And that's very important, right? That's one way. And the second way is that. How do we make it pay?